star was 2087, and Earth was about to change forever. Most people were going about their day when the skies above major cities darkened with the arrival of massive ships. They weren't attacking, just hovering there, silent and waiting. The news spread faster than any virus, and soon the whole world was looking up. The ship that landed in the neutral territory of New Zealand was called the Eternal Light. Commander Tay stepped out first, his blue-tinted skin reflecting the sunlight as he blinked his 4 eyes to adjust to Earth's atmosphere. He'd studied humans for years, but seeing them in person made him nervous. Their unpredictable nature concerned many in the Galactic Confederation. They survived 3 near-extinction events, he'd told his crew during the journey. No other species we've encountered has that kind of resilience. They adapt too quickly. Earth's leaders gathered quickly. After the initial panic settled, they sent Ambassador Kim to meet the aliens. She was chosen for her calm demeanor and sharp mind. Kim had worked through plenty of human conflicts, but never imagined she'd be humanity's first voice to the stars. The meeting took place in a hastily constructed dome. News cameras captured every moment as Kim walked forward, her steps measured and confident despite her racing heart. "Welcome to Earth," she said simply, offering a slight bow instead of a handshake, unsure if touching would be welcome. Tay nodded, back. "We come in peace and curiosity. The Galactic Confederation has been watching your development for centuries." The first days were filled with careful conversations. Humans learned they weren't alone. There were over 30 spacefaring civilizations connected through the Confederation. Most had evolved differently than humans, developing cooperation before competition, empathy before aggression. Scientists from both sides were fascinated by each other. The aliens were particularly interested in human brain scans. "Remarkable," said June, Tay's chief scientist, pointing to the amygdala readings. "Their fear response triggers problem-solving centers. For most species, fear paralyzes. For humans, it motivates." What the humans didn't know was how this made the Confederation nervous. Species that converted fear to action often became unpredictable. The Confederation valued stability above all. During a private meal with his staff, Tay's aide Han made a comment he thought was out of human earshot. "These are primitive emotional creatures," Han said, pushing the earth food around his plate. "They create art about suffering and find meaning in struggle." How exhausting. Kim, who had stepped back into the room to retrieve her forgotten tablet, heard every word. She paused, considered confronting them, then quietly picked up her device and left without a word. There would be time for cultural understanding later. First contact wasn't the moment to create friction. Back in the diplomatic quarters, Kim reported the comment to her team. "They think we're primitive because we feel deeply," she said. "They see our emotions as a weakness." General Lee, her military advisor, frowned. "And that makes us unpredictable to them. We should be careful. Species who consider themselves superior rarely make good allies." "Let's not jump to conclusions," Kim cautioned. "Their evolution took a different path. They value harmony and stability. We've spent our history fighting predators, disease, each other. Of course, we seem strange to them." The misunderstanding grew in small ways. Confederation representatives spoke of humans as developing and emerging, terms that felt condescending to Earth's leaders. Meanwhile, human directness and emotional displays made the aliens uncomfortable. By the end of the first month, the initial wonder had worn off. Now came the hard part, figuring out how humans would fit into a galaxy that had been connected for thousands of years without them. Trade agreements were the first step. Earth had resources the Confederation wanted: art, music, and raw materials like gold and platinum. In exchange, humans received medical knowledge that cured several diseases almost overnight. But tensions simmered beneath the surface. The Confederation expected humans to follow their lead in all things, while humans pushed for equal standing. Kim often found herself explaining human stubbornness to frustrated alien diplomats. "We don't have a hive mind," she told Tay during one particularly difficult negotiation. "We value individual thought. It's messy, but it works for us." What neither side fully understood was how fundamentally different they were. The Confederation saw human passion as volatility. Humans saw Confederation caution as stagnation. This misunderstanding would prove costly in the years to come, as other forces in the galaxy took notice of Earth. The Verax Empire, with their militant expansion, watched Earth's integration with calculating eyes. They saw what the Confederation missed. Beneath the humans' cooperative exterior was a species that had clawed its way to dominance through sheer determination, and they were about to make a terrible mistake by testing that determination. 5 years went by pretty fast. Earth had changed in ways nobody could have imagined before the aliens showed up. You'd see Confederation tourists taking pictures at the Great Wall of China, while human merchants sold coffee and chocolate in space stations billions of miles from home. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. Humans learned to navigate the complex rules of galactic trade. We weren't the richest or most advanced species out there, but we had things others wanted. Our music made alien ears perk up with curiosity. Our stories about overcoming impossible odds confused them, but kept them listening. And some of our food, especially spicy dishes, became expensive delicacies in fancy space restaurants. Ambassador Kim had set up a permanent office on the Confederation Central Station, a massive structure orbiting a star about 40 light-years from Earth. She'd gotten pretty good at alien politics, though it still frustrated her. "They talk in circles," she complained to her assistant during a rare break. 3-hour meetings where nothing gets decided. Meanwhile, human colonies had sprung up on 4 planets in nearby star systems. Nothing fancy, mostly research stations and mining operations with a few thousand people each. But they were the first steps of humanity reaching beyond our solar system. Not everyone in the galaxy was happy about this. The Verax Empire controlled about a third of the galaxy's outer rim. They looked somewhat like tall, thin humans, but with gray skin and ridge-lined faces. Unlike the peace-loving Confederation, the Verax believed in taking what they wanted. They'd been at a cold war with the Confederation for centuries. Admiral Du, commander of the Verax Third Fleet, had been watching humans with growing interest. He'd studied their history of warfare and found it fascinatingly brutal. In a report to Verax High Command, he wrote, "These creatures fight with surprising creativity. They adapt quickly and don't surrender easily. They could become a problem, if allowed to develop further." The Verax decided to test human reactions. They sent warships to conduct military exercises near New Hope, one of the human colony worlds. Giant battleships would jump into the system, fly close to human shipping lanes, and then disappear again. Ambassador Kim filed complaints with the Confederation Council. "These are clear provocations," she argued before the assembled alien representatives. "The Verax are trying to intimidate us." The council, led by senior diplomat Jun, advised caution. "The Verax enjoy reactions," Jun explained patiently. "If you ignore them, they will lose interest. Confrontation is exactly what they want." The humans weren't convinced, but they followed the advice. For 2 months, they pretended not to notice, as Verax ships came closer and stayed longer each time. Captain Park of the UES Pathfinder wasn't the type to sit around waiting. Her ship was small and fast, designed for exploration rather than fighting. When a Verax scout ship appeared at the edge of the New Hope system, then jumped away, she made a bold decision. "We're following them," she told her surprised crew. "Let's see where they're going." The Pathfinder's engineer, Officer Song, had modified their engines with some human ingenuity. "They won't detect us if we trail their jump signature," he promised. "It's like riding in their wake." It was risky and completely against Confederation protocols. If caught spying on the Verax, they could trigger a diplomatic incident. But Park trusted her gut, and her gut said the Verax were up to something bad. The Omri Pathfinder followed the scout to a hidden base on an asteroid at the edge of unclaimed space. Using passive sensors only, they recorded everything they saw. A massive buildup of Verax warships, supply vessels being loaded with invasion troops, and most damning of all, they intercepted communications about a preemptive strike against human expansion. When Park brought this evidence back to Earth, military leaders took it seriously. Admiral Choi called an emergency meeting with Confederation representatives. "Look at these images," Choi said, pointing to the fleet gathering. "In the recordings, they're planning to attack our colonies. We need to prepare defenses immediately." The Confederation diplomats examined the evidence with concerned expressions. Then senior diplomat June spoke carefully. These ships could be gathered for many reasons. Perhaps it's their annual military parade? We must not jump to conclusions. That could escalate tensions. General Lee slammed his hand on the table. Annual parade? They have targeting data for our colonies. They're calculating orbital bombardment trajectories. Jun remained calm. The Varax posture and threaten, but rarely attack without significant provocation. We've coexisted with them for centuries using diplomatic channels. The meeting ended in frustration. The Confederation promised to send a strongly worded message to the Varax government, but nothing more. They simply couldn't understand why humans were so alarmed. They think we're overreacting, Choi told his staff afterward. They don't get that we've spent our entire history learning to recognize threats. Earth's military leaders faced a tough choice. Follow the Confederation's advice and wait, or prepare for war and risk looking paranoid. In the end, they decided on a middle path. They wouldn't attack first, but they'd quietly reinforce the colonies and put the fleet on alert. Captain Park, whose discovery had started all this, found herself promoted to fleet intelligence. Keep watching them, Choi ordered. I want to know the moment those ships move. She nodded grimly. They're coming, sir. I can feel it. The Varax, meanwhile, were delighted by the Confederation's response. In their war room, Admiral Doe smiled at the diplomatic message they'd received. See how the Confederation protects these humans? He told his officers. They've taken them under their wing like helpless children. When we crush one colony, the humans will run crying to the Confederation, and nothing will happen. What the Varax failed to understand was an old human saying that would have served them well. Hope for peace, prepare for war. While appearing to follow the Confederation's advice, humans were quietly getting ready. They were betting their lives that the Varax had underestimated them. They were about to find out if that bet would pay off. The attack came at dawn, local time. The people of New Horizon were just starting their day when the sky lit up with flashes brighter than lightning. The colony's small orbital defense station tried to send a warning, but it was cut off mid-transmission. 30 seconds later, it was just floating debris. 10 Varax battleships moved into position around the peaceful colony world. They didn't bother with demands or ultimatums. They simply opened fire. Jin-Ho was a farmer on the outskirts of the main settlement. He was checking his hydroponics garden when the first blast hit the colony center, about 5 miles away. The shockwave knocked him off his feet. When he looked up, a mushroom cloud was rising where the government buildings had been. Sumin, he screamed, thinking of his wife who worked in the communications center. He ran toward his truck as the ground shook with more impacts. The colony had no real defenses. There were a few security officers with standard weapons, but nothing that could stop orbital bombardment. All they could do was run. Jin-Ho never made it to town. The Varax were thorough, targeting not just the main settlement but outlying areas too. His truck was flipped over by a blast half a mile from his farm. As he crawled from the wreckage, the last thing he saw was a flash of light from above. Governor Yoon managed to get a distress call out before the Varax destroyed the backup communications array. We are under attack, she reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Multiple strikes on civilian targets, casualties. She paused as another explosion rocked the building. Casualties are extreme. This is a deliberate massacre. The message reached Earth 20 minutes later. It spread through military channels first, then to government leaders. By noon, the entire planet knew. Humans had been attacked. The response on Earth was not what the Varax expected. There were no mass protests demanding surrender, no panic in the streets. Instead, a cold, eerie calm settled over humanity. In an emergency session of the United Earth Congress, military leaders laid out what they knew. Admiral Choi's face was grim as he showed the satellite imagery. New Horizon has been destroyed, he said flatly. We estimate 16,000 dead. The Varax bombardment was precise and methodical. They knew exactly what they were doing. The chamber was silent. Then someone asked the question on everyone's mind. What do we do now? President Lee stood up. First, we mourn our dead. Then we ensure no more humans will die at Varak's hands. The Confederation sent a delegation to Earth immediately. Senior diplomat Jun expressed his deep regret over the unfortunate incident and promised that the Confederation would take action. We propose severe economic sanctions against the Varak's empire, he announced. Additionally, we will censure them in the strongest possible terms at the next council meeting. Ambassador Kim listened with growing disbelief. Sanctions? Censure? They murdered 16,000 people. Jun blinked his 4 eyes slowly. I understand this is emotional for you, but the Confederation has maintained peace for centuries through measured responses. Escalation leads only to more violence. So we should just accept that our people were killed? General Lee asked. You should trust in the process, Jun replied. The Varaks likely meant this as a demonstration, not the beginning of full hostilities. They wanted to establish dominance. If you respond with violence, you validate their methods. After the Confederation representatives left, Earth's leaders gathered in a secure room. They expect us to do nothing, Admiral Choi said, disgust evident. In his voice, President Lee nodded. The Confederation doesn't understand us. Maybe they can't. They evolved differently. He looked around the room. Options. What happened next surprised the watching galaxy. Human ships stopped their usual routes. Earth's representatives to various Confederation committees sent polite messages saying they would be temporarily unavailable. Communication with human colonies became minimal. The Confederation interpreted this as shock and trauma. The humans are retreating inward to process their grief, Senior Diplomat Jun reported to the Council. This is consistent with their emotional nature. They will return to normal function once they've worked through their feelings. But behind this apparent withdrawal, humanity was moving with single-minded purpose. Admiral Choi activated Protocol Thermopylae, a contingency plan developed after Captain Park's discovery of the Varak's fleet. Civilian ships were quietly converted to military transports. Mothballed warships from old Earth conflicts were pulled from storage and upgraded. Factory production shifted to ammunition and supplies. Most remarkably, there was no dissent. Countries that had been rivals for centuries worked together without argument. Resources were pooled, expertise shared. Humanity moved as one. In orbit above Mars, the largest shipyard in the solar system worked around the clock. Workers took stimulants to stay awake for days at a time, modifying freighters into troop carriers and fitting civilian vessels with makeshift armor and weapons. They won't expect us to hit back so hard, said Chief Engineer Ji-won as she supervised the installation of a railgun on what had been a luxury passenger liner. That's our advantage. Meanwhile, in the diplomatic quarter, Ambassador Kim met with representatives from every human government. The meeting was brief, and at the end, they signed what became known as the Athens Declaration. No further human life will be sacrificed to alien aggression. The response will be swift, proportional, and absolute. The Varaks, pleased with their successful, minor corrective action, were celebrating. Admiral Do received a promotion for the efficient operation. The humans will understand their place now, he told his officers. The Confederation will calm them down with promises of meetings and resolutions. By the time those meetings happen, the humans will have accepted reality. In his report to Varak's High Command, he wrote, "These creatures are like all the others. The Confederation protects, soft, conflict-averse, and ultimately willing to accept domination rather than fight." It was perhaps the most catastrophically wrong assessment in galactic military history. 3 weeks after the destruction of New Horizon, Admiral Choi stood on the bridge of the hastily commissioned UES Vengeance. Around him, a fleet of over 200 ships prepared to jump to their targets. "All ships report ready, sir," his communications officer said. Choi nodded. "Send the final code. Remember New Horizon." Throughout the fleet, crews who had trained day and night for this moment moved to battle stations. There were no speeches, no cheers. Just a cold determination that took even the most hardened officers by surprise. The Varaks were about to learn why provoking humans was a fatal mistake. The Varax military base on Krell's moon was having a normal shift change when the sensors picked up something strange. Multiple jump signatures appeared at the edge of the system, far more than the usual. "Traffic. Probably a merchant convoy," said the duty officer with a yawn. The Varax had gotten lazy after centuries of easy victories. Why worry? No one dared attack them. By the time they realized what was happening, 20 human ships had already entered. Weapons range. The base commander barely had time to sound the alarm before the first missiles hit. At the same moment, across Varax space, 6 other military installations came under coordinated attack. It was like someone had kicked a hornet's nest that everyone thought was empty, but turned out to be full of very angry hornets with surprisingly big stingers. Admiral Dew was enjoying dinner when an aide burst into his quarters. "Sir, we're under attack. Humans at 7 different locations." Dew nearly choked on his food. "Impossible. They have no warships that could reach our territory." But they did. Human merchant ships had been mapping jump points for years, and while the Confederation thought humans were hiding in grief, they'd been planning the most daring military operation in Earth's history. On the bridge of the UES Vengeance, Admiral Choi watched as the first phase of the assault unfolded. His tactical display showed green lights across the board. "All strike teams report successful initial hits," reported his second-in-command. "The Varax are scrambling their defense fleets, but they're disorganized." Choi nodded. "Begin Phase 2. The human attack was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Confederation observers watched in stunned silence as battle footage reached them. The humans weren't fighting like a civilized species. They were fighting like humans. At the shipyards of Varax Prime, Captain Ji Young's small strike force was outnumbered 5-1. Normal military doctrine would call for a retreat. "Full speed ahead," Ji Young ordered instead. "Target their command center." Her helmsman looked back in shock. "Sir, that's a suicide run." Ji Young's face was calm. "I know. Do it anyway." Her ship, the Defiant, accelerated straight toward the Varax defensive line. 2 escort vessels followed, creating a wall of fire that drew the enemy's attention. As Varax weapons tore into the Defiant's hull, the ship stayed on course. "Engine room reporting critical damage," called out a young officer, her voice shaking. "We can't take much more." "We don't need much more," Ji Young replied. "Just a few more seconds." The Defiant slammed into the Varax command center at nearly EUE half-light speed. The explosion was visible from the planet below. In the confusion that followed, the rest of the human fleet destroyed the shipyard's production facilities before jumping away. This same scene played out across Varax space. Human captains used tactics that horrified Confederation observers, deliberately taking hits to create openings, using damaged ships as weapons, and sending soldiers on missions that had minimal survival chances. On Varax colony world Grell, a team of human special forces lost their extraction ship to enemy fire. Instead of surrendering, they continued their mission to destroy a weapons factory, fighting house to house for 18 hours until they reached their target. None survived, but the factory, which had produced the bombs that fell on New Horizon, was reduced to rubble. The Varax couldn't understand what they were seeing. In their culture, military actions were about establishing dominance, not fighting to the death. When faced with superior force, you were supposed to back down and save your resources for another day. The humans didn't back down. Even when outgunned, they pressed forward with a determination that bordered on madness. Their only concession to self-preservation seemed to be their careful targeting. They hit military installations while avoiding civilian centers whenever possible. After the 3rd day of attacks, the Varax Emperor demanded the Confederation intervene. "These humans are using forbidden tactics," he sputtered to the council. "They're violating all established rules of engagement. You must stop them before they destabilize the entire sector." Senior diplomat Jun turned to Ambassador Kim, who had returned to the council for this emergency session. "Perhaps it is time to discuss terms," he suggested gently. "You have made your point. The Varax understand your displeasure now." Kim's expression didn't change. "Displeasure? Is that what you think this is about?" She stood up, looking around, at the assembled representatives of dozens of species. You still don't understand humans. We don't fight to make a point. We don't fight to negotiate better terms. We fight to end threats permanently. The chamber went silent. We asked for your help when we discovered the Varax buildup. You told us to be patient. We reported their provocations. You told us to ignore them. 16,000 of our people died while following your advice. Her voice never raised, but the intensity made several representatives squirm in their seats. Now you ask us to stop? No. We didn't start this war, but we will finish it. Stay out of our way. Back on the front lines, the human offensive continued with mechanical precision. Military bases, shipyards, weapon factories, anything that could help the Varax war machine became a target. Admiral Du, once celebrated for his minor corrective action, now found himself trying to explain a series of catastrophic defeats. These humans don't fight logically, he protested to his superiors. They accept casualty rates that no rational species would tolerate. What the Varax couldn't grasp was that humans had millennia of experience with war. Their history books were filled with battles, strategies, and hard-learned lessons about conflict. While other species had evolved beyond regular warfare, humans had been forced to master it to survive their own violent past. Even the Confederation's military analysts were revising their assessments of humanity. Their apparent emotional nature masks a frightening tactical intelligence, one report noted. They use emotion as fuel rather than allowing it to cloud judgment. By the second week, the pattern was clear. Humans struck hard, achieved their objectives, and withdrew before major Varax reinforcements could arrive. They avoided prolonged engagements, preferring surgical strikes that maximized damage while minimizing their own losses. After a particularly devastating raid that destroyed the Varax's largest military academy, the Emperor received a message from Earth. It was simple. This can end whenever you choose. Unconditional surrender is the only term. The Emperor, who had never imagined losing to a species that had barely begun interstellar travel, threw the message aside in rage. "We will crush these primitives," he declared. His advisors exchanged nervous glances. No one wanted to state the obvious. The humans were winning. As the conflict entered its third week, Confederation diplomats made another attempt at mediation. Senior diplomat Jun approached Admiral Choi directly. "This violence solves nothing," Jun insisted. "Both sides will eventually need to talk." Choi looked at the diplomat with tired eyes. "You're right. We will talk when the Varax no longer have the capability to harm another human colony." "The cycle of retaliation must end somewhere," Jun pressed. "Yes," Choi agreed. "It ends with them unable to retaliate further." As the human fleet prepared for another series of strikes, a message spread through the ranks. "Remember New Horizon." It wasn't a battle cry or a slogan. It was a reminder of why they fought, and why they wouldn't stop until the job was done. 6 months after the destruction of New Horizon, the Varax Empire's military was in ruins. They had lost 7 out of 10 warships, most of their orbital, defense platforms, and nearly all of their major weapons factories. The proud empire that had terrorized a quarter of the galaxy for centuries had been brought to its knees by a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 15 years earlier. The surrender ceremony took place on a neutral space station. The Varax Emperor himself didn't attend, claiming illness, but sent his highest-ranking surviving admiral instead. The once mighty Varax military leader looked small and defeated as he approached the table where Admiral Choi waited. No handshakes were offered. No words were exchanged beyond the formal reading of the surrender terms. When the Varax admiral pressed his palm to the document scanner, officially ending the war, there were no cheers from the human delegation, just nods and the quiet relief of a terrible job finally finished. Confederation observers had expected the humans to gloat or impose crushing terms on their defeated enemy. Instead, the peace agreement was surprisingly straightforward. The Varax would disarm most of their military, pay to rebuild New Horizon, and stay away from human space for the next 100 years. There were no demands for territory, no crippling economic penalties, no humiliating political concessions. I don't understand, Senior Diplomat Jun told Ambassador Kim afterward. You could have taken half their worlds. They couldn't have stopped you. Kim shook her head. We didn't want their worlds. We just wanted them to never threaten us again. But after what they did, we're not like them, Kim interrupted. We don't destroy for the sake of dominance. We fought because we had to, not because we wanted to. As human ships began returning home, the Confederation Council called an emergency session to discuss the implications of what they'd witnessed. The Human-Variks War had lasted just 6 months, but it had shattered centuries of assumptions about how conflict worked in the galaxy. They fight like nothing we've ever seen, said one analyst, showing footage of human ships executing maneuvers that more cautious species would consider too risky. They're willing to accept casualties that would make other species surrender immediately. Another diplomat pointed out something even more surprising. Despite their ferocity in battle, they showed remarkable restraint. They could have bombed Variks civilian centers in retaliation for New Horizon. They didn't. The council was divided. Some saw humans as a dangerous new threat that needed careful monitoring. Others recognized potential valuable allies who could help maintain galactic peace through their mere existence. After all, who would risk provoking a species that had dismantled one of the galaxy's most feared military powers in half a year? The formal peace conference held on the Confederation's Central Station. Representatives from 30 species gathered to witness the final treaty signing. The mood was tense. Many wondered if humans could truly set aside their warlike nature now that the fighting was done. Ambassador Kim stepped up to address the assembly. She looked tired. The war had taken its toll on everyone, but her voice was strong and clear. Many of you have asked why we fought the way we did, she began. Some have called us brutal. Others called us efficient. The truth is simpler. We fought the only way we know how, to win. She paused, looking around the room. We are not naturally warlike, but we are absolutely lethal when provoked. We've spent our evolutionary history fighting predators, nature, disease, and ourselves. That history taught us something important. Half measures in conflict lead to more conflict. The chamber was silent, every alien representative hanging on her words. But we've also learned something else through our history. How to set violence aside when it's no longer needed. We can compartmentalize war, use it as a tool, then put it away. That doesn't make us dangerous. It makes us responsible with our capacity for destruction. As Kim spoke, many in the chamber began to understand humans for the first time. Their restraint wasn't a limitation, it was a choice. Their compassion existed alongside their capacity for violence, not in spite of it. Later that evening, Senior Diplomat Jun approached Admiral Choi at the reception. The alien seemed nervous, which was unusual for his normally composed species. I owe you an apology, Jun said. When you warned us about the Variks buildup, I dismissed your concerns. I thought you were being paranoid. Choi nodded, accepting the apology without comment. How did you know? Jun asked. How did you know they would attack? The Admiral took a sip of his drink before answering. Because we recognized ourselves in them, the worst parts of ourselves. Throughout our history, we've had empires like the Variks, groups who thought might made right. We know how they think because we've thought that way too. Jun blinked his 4 eyes rapidly, processing this. That is disturbing. It should be, Choi replied. But it's also why we were ready, and it's why we stopped when we did. We know where that path leads. On Earth, life was starting to return to normal. The emergency war measures were being scaled back. Factories that had been making weapons were returning to civilian production. Ships that had been converted for military use were being restored to their original purposes. In schools across the planet, teachers explained to children what had happened and why. They didn't hide the truth or glorify the violence. Instead, they talked about responsibility, about standing up to bullies, and about knowing when to stop. At the newly established Galactic Affairs Academy in what was once Kenya, young cadets trained to represent humanity among the stars. Their instructors, veterans of the Varax conflict, emphasized one lesson above all others. Our strength isn't in our ability to fight, it's in our ability to choose when not to. 6 months after the peace conference, the Confederation added a new protocol to their diplomatic guidelines. It was distributed to all member species and made required reading for anyone dealing with humans. It read simply, "Beware of humans. They do not seek conflict, but neither do they shy from it. Their restraint is not weakness, it is choice. Their compassion is not naivety, it is wisdom. They have mastered war precisely so they can choose peace. Respect this paradox, for provoking them is a fatal mistake." On the restored colony of New Horizon, a memorial garden bloomed where the government buildings once stood. 16,000 trees, one for each life lost, grew in concentric circles. At the center stood a simple stone with an inscription that summed up humanity's new place in the galaxy. We came in peace. We will defend peace. We will return to peace. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans were indeed unlike any species they had encountered before. Their contradictions weren't flaws. They were the source of their greatest strength. They could fight with terrifying efficiency and show mercy with equal conviction. As Ambassador Kim often said in the years that followed, "We're not the strongest species or the smartest or the most advanced, but we might be the most determined. Push us and we push back. Threaten what we love and you'll discover just how far we'll go to protect it." The Varax had learned this lesson the hard way. The rest of the galaxy was taking notes,